Welcome to episode 145 of the Omnigamers Club podcast, the podcast for games on all platforms, including the Nintendo e-reader. I am Daniel Winter.
And I'm Mark USA. Hello out there, world.
Hello. How are you doing this week, Mark?
Yeah, I'm doing not too badly. I redid my kind of office setup, which you can't tell from this point of view, but from my point of view, it's totally changed, which is makes me wonder why I didn't do it in the first place a long time ago. But it's good to spruce up your
Spring
work
clean.
environment. Yeah,
Excellent.
because this is where I work, my day job as well. So that's a good thing. That feels good, and the weather's turning nicer, at least warmer
Yes.
in Vancouver as well. So that's a nice feeling too.
Excellent. Well, that said, we are spending a lot of time indoors playing games still. We've got three courses of games news and discussions coming up, and lots to talk about today, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we're going to probably talk at length about one game, but we'll see what else fits in. Lots of news going on, so why don't we dive right into it and talk about something for our appetizer section?
Certainly.
You wanna start us off?
Yeah, just very quickly. Speaking of the Nintendo e-reader, I bring that up because I saw a little update on Blue Sky that someone is making a game for that. There may be several people still making it, but there was this one particular project called Dizzy Sheep Disaster EX by Sarah Lynn. And I'm curious, are you familiar with the e-reader?
Is that the one that uses it's a magnetic strip reader that read data off of cards?
My impression was it was more like a QR code. It was like reading like a photo reading. Maybe it was more of a swipe. I'm not sure.
There definitely was a peripheral, I think, for the original Game Boy that could read off of swipes
This is
of
the
digital
advance, I
cards.
believe.
Okay. And of course, the original GBA also had the GBA camera, or the GB camera. So I'm not sure if this is a different third peripheral that I wasn't thinking of.
Quite possibly, yeah. I wasn't familiar with it myself, but I love seeing people supporting old hardware. It's a fun concept. I remember at the Vancouver Game Garden, we saw people selling games on like Game Boy cartridges. So it's always a lot of fun seeing that sort of underground, very bootleg game culture still alive and well.
Yeah, there's something still magical about a cartridge game that it feels kind of mystical that it's all in there. I actually feel the same way about CDs too. Like CDs felt new for the longest time for me, new school compared to other traditional formats like cassette tapes and video game cartridges and things like that. But in this day and age, when we're so removed from any kind of physical media, that CDs kind of feel like this magical crystalline formation that imparts joy and creativity. So I think there's something to be said about physical media for sure.
Absolutely. So what's news to you, Mark?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff going on. You brought a lot of things to the table, but I think we're both looking at some of the Microsoft news going around. Of course, people are probably aware, long-term listeners are aware that we used to be big proponents of Xbox and Microsoft games initiatives, big fans of the Xbox Game Pass, but we both boycotted supporting first-party games and all services from that platform because of the BDS movement recommending so. And we still agree. But that said, I still have a lot of emotional attachment, historical connection to the Xbox brand. So I read news following it. And of course, there has been, news that we talked about before, new CEO in, some other people out. And it seems as though the big news coming out this week is a potential or an upcoming price cut for Xbox Game Pass being one of them. And then there was other smaller news about shifting use of removing Microsoft games and going back to the Xbox brand. So there's little shifts and movements here and there. What do you think about all that, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like a shakeup has been necessary. The fact that they're moving so swiftly to try and right the ship would suggest that they're hurting, that the line is not going up, that they're trying to correct course. That is said, as you mentioned, like the BDS movement is still very much active. I will not be renewing my Game Pass support by any means. I just found this a curious development in that regards, and I think it shows that they are being impacted by people by gamers' choices. I'm sure a lot of people dropped their Game Pass, whether it was for that or for the sheer cost of it that was going up.
Yeah, definitely for me and probably both of us, it was for a number of reasons. You, individuals cannot bear an ever increasing expense for all of these streaming subscriptions that are out there, were really popular for a while and offered a great value for a while, and seemingly they're offering less or more than we can actually reasonably consume and charging a real premium for it. It's as though each streaming service believes that they're the only streaming service that an individual might want to subscribe to.
They're trying to being in five boiling pots at once as they're all increasing that simmer. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the price is still above where it was before the last price increase. It's not like reverted completely for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that the Sony offering is any better by that measure either. I did seriously consider getting a PS5 and jumping on the PlayStation Plus bandwagon around the holiday time, but it didn't do it. I'm not regretting my choice though, even though the hardware has gone up in price, because I can't reasonably justify needing another platform, and I have so many games that I want to play, and I don't have to play the new hotness. So yeah, the price drop for price cut for Xbox Game Pass, and I should mention the really important factor there is the way that they're justifying it is that you do not get the new Call of Duty games day and date.
Yeah, I think they're doing like a 12-month moratorium on those before they added the Game Pass. Obviously, those are, I'm sure, a big cash cow for Microsoft, including selling them on other platforms as well. So that the lines weren't quite matching up there, I guess, for them.
Right, and I already mentioned a little bit about the changing of the brand and kind of repositioning things that they're doing at Microsoft. Another factor that it seems they're distancing themselves from is this is an Xbox.
My toaster isn't an Xbox anymore?
Yes, this is an Xbox marketing campaign, which was everywhere. It was blasted everywhere and confused basically everyone. Is like, if everything is an Xbox, then why do I need an Xbox? They probably realized that was a kind of a boneheaded move, especially when they were trying to release new hardware, like their portable gaming PC slash portable, not a console, that they released a short time ago. And from all reports, all rumors, it sounds like the next Xbox, the real one, home console that they'll try to release will be more open, like a more PC-like, quote-unquote, open platform, which kind of is a no-brainer for Microsoft, being a company that wrote the most popular personal computer OS in history, that they would go back into that direction. But it's also kind of a desperate play, a risky play, because they're basically saying, go install Steam and GOG and Epic Games on this box. If they fixed their political support, the Israeli army, and divested themselves of all their kind of weapons deals with various governments around the world, then I would be tempted to buy such a product that plays Xbox kind of branded games, but also other things as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go back, to be honest. At this, I've mentioned before, like I've enjoyed being a little more intentional with what I play, with where I put my support, and excuse me, rather than just dabbling and picking it a little bit here and there, and like just being more intentional with playing one game in depth and absorbing all I can from that, rather than feeling myself pulled in multiple directions, which is like my attention span has been shot lately. So any excuse to try and reset a little bit and recalibrate, I will take.
Yeah, I kind of agree. One of the reasons that is not political or financial that I dropped Xbox Game Pass is that I couldn't keep up. Like, and I can't be bothered now to even read what the new games coming out for those platforms are because I just don't have the capacity to play them. It's a good thing that we've always been open to playing things that are not the new hotness because I just can't keep up with the trend. I guess that should be not a big surprise though, because people are always trying to sell you things, right? Throughout this world, people will always make more games because they want to sell more games. And of course, there are creatives out there that are doing really powerful, interesting, personal, artistic expressions, but there are also more of them than we could reasonably consume at a time.
Games, they don't stop coming.
No, they don't. Speaking of, let's talk about some other news topics. Anything intriguing you?
Yeah, well, from a rare price decrease in games to a rare bit of good news in games journalism. That is Kotaku. It's back, apparently. So apparently last year, Kotaku was bought from Geo Media by a company called, what was it, Keliops, which I'm not familiar with. At the time, I probably disregarded that as, oh, it's just another, Swiss, finance company trying to extract what wealth they can. Seems like they are actually trying to invest and improve that business. It's been steadily increasing. They are hiring new journalists. A bit of news just came out that they've hired Rebecca Valentine, who is a seasoned reporter, as a senior journalist over at Kotaku there now, and with more hires to come. So it's just a promising impression that they are actually invested in the long run and focused on investigative journalism in games, which has been sorely missing for a while.
Right. It just seems like the game's press has slowly been disappearing, with the exception of course, the old kind of pillar, IGN, which is really just, the marketing arm of the games industry, just as the Game Awards is not really about awards, it's about showing trailers. Um, I really can't follow a lot of video game news these days, anyways, because it's always trying to send me listicles towards US Amazon deals and things like that. Which,
SEO primes full of links and yeah.
yeah, it's of very little use to me. And the stories that I do appreciate, those that are kind of quirky, kind of news stories that are either like really deep cut stories about old Japanese games, or just kind of interesting, more salacious news stories about the industry or individual players that the indie news sources like your Rascals and things like that, and your Aftermath or
Aftermath, yeah.
whatever have been providing have been way more interesting to read. So yeah, I haven't really been missing the old platforms per se, and I wasn't really a big fan. I wasn't a hater on Kotaku. I just didn't really read it, so I
I've
guess
been
it's good.
avoiding it for a while, partly because I just assumed that like the new ownership was going the same way as the old one, along with Polygon. Maybe they've been better for a while now. I haven't checked, but I mean, that said, we were obviously both a fan of a lot of the independent brands like Aftermath and Rascal. But I think there is still something to be said about the support and networks of larger media outlets that have that larger funding and higher network of ways of reaching out and pulling on those threads with the investigative journalism and like the legal support, things like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think to have a healthy industry, especially a journalistic industry, you need players of all different sizes, and having the larger companies will help kind of raise the rafters to help the indies as well. It's kind of like the movie industry can't survive on indie movies alone, despite the fact that those indies are some of the most interesting movies out there. Need a bit of a balance.
Sorry.
All right, speaking of balance, shall we talk about some other stories? This is actually just a couple of light ones for me. I don't really know a lot of details about these. They just struck me as interesting. One of them, I just came upon this last week, is a report that the Elden Ring movie has begun filming. So it's a long ways out still. But I didn't know that it was going to be an A24 production, so that strikes me as interesting. Hopefully, it doesn't have George R. R. Martin involved much at all. Otherwise, it'll take forever to come out. I don't know. I'm like a passing Elden Ring fan. I didn't play it nearly as much as you did, so I don't really know if the lore is worthy of it, but the world building is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what the movie would even be about. I mean, other like there's a lot of setting and lore. There's not much actual story as you as a player going through it and killing all of the big bads in the game, right? I never really performed the archaeology required to extract the information there. I've seen some suggestions that they could do, but basically go like a flashback to some of the pre-established lore in the history of that. I think it's called like the Night of the Black Knives or something like that. It's an event that's often hinted at in the game that I'm sure they could flash back to. I'm conflicted in the involvement of Alex Garland, who has written probably one of my, well, potentially my favorite movie of the last 10 years, Annihilation, but also not didn't love some of the other films like Civil War. He's a man of many degrees there. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to go.
Yeah, hard to say. So just keep an eye out for that. Maybe it'll be good. Another story that I just came upon today, which I thought was interesting, but I don't know much about, is that there was a little story about an upcoming game that's being kickstarted or crowdfunded. It's called One of Us Will Die. It's apparently a social deduction tabletop role-playing game. So this struck me as very interesting because, of course, there are plenty of social deduction tabletop games, card games particularly, or just kind of folk games.
Tower.
Yeah, we talked about Werewolf and Mafia, of course, Secret Hitler, lots of games, Coup. There's so many of them. But I thought a social deduction role-playing game would be of real interest because those social deduction tabletop games almost want to move into that direction anyways. You almost find the more dramatic players around a table tend to take that and make it a more narrative experience anyway. So to me, seems like a natural fit that a game could go that way. And it goes towards my personal belief that I think there's a lot more in common between tabletop role-playing games and social tabletop board games than a lot of people give it credit. A lot of of course, we cross the barrier very easily and very often, sometimes on the same night. But some people are just like, will never cross that line. I will only play board games or I will only play TTRPGs, and they kind of give a bit of side eye to the other side of the table, and I think that's unfortunate. I think if we allow ourselves a little bit of leeway here, I think people would find enjoyment in dipping their toes into the other side of things. Anyways, I don't know much about this account, so I will dig deeper as well. I just thought, that piques my interest. That's One of Us Will Die, a social deduction TTRPG.
Yeah, always interested in games blurring the lines a little more rather than drawing that hard distinction between the various industries as if it were a football game or something. It's tricky. Like so many people are set in their ways. I mean, I personally for years was like, oh, I don't do that sort of thing. I had a very firm idea of what role playing was and what it could be, and I don't play with that. But obviously, as I have learned, it's much wider than I knew.
Yeah, and recently I've been getting into more tabletop skirmish games, which has been of great interest. So take it from us, a couple of omnigamers. It's fun to see what the other side is getting into once in a while. Speaking of talking about the other side, do you have any more news stories, or should we move on to our main course?
Yeah, let's just squeeze in one last little quirky bit of news. I saw an article from a Japanese site actually called Meinichi, saying Japanese fire officials suspended for forcing colleagues to play board games while working. Curiously, he was apparently these were his own games that he had designed and was basically forcing his colleagues to playtest with him. I mean, we were just talking about playtesting a couple of episodes ago and how hard it is to find people willing to playtest your games. And you've got a captive audience of your underlings at work. I mean, I guess that's an option.
Yeah, don't tell anyone at the Vancouver Playtest Group that this is a valid strategy to get some playtest going of your prototypes. Yeah, Mainichi is actually one of the larger newspapers within Japan. Mainichi meaning every day, the daily, essentially. So that's a serious outlet for this news story to go out on. I just scanned it as well, and I thought it was pretty cute. Yeah, it sounds like this person was really more of like a budding like game designer that was trying to literally get playtesters happening rather than just, embezzling money or some other more salacious tidbit like that. So good for a little bit of a laugh. I guess it's still abuse of your power in the office space.
All for a
So
good cause.
sure, the games must be published. There you go. All right, I think we should move into a main course now. Are we going to be talking about the big game, or are
I
we going
think
to talk about
so.
a
We
couple of
hinted at a
little
couple
ones?
of games last week that we didn't get to, so I think we'll finally pull that out and for analysis there.
All right. So,
Top it.
is Ted okay?
Oh, he's fine.
Okay. So, this is going to be a kind of a first for us. This is going to be a kind of a return to a game because this is revisiting a game that we mentioned not too long ago. I think it was in episode 129. So this is in our 140s, 144 or something this episode is. So not too long ago, but you started playing it and I finished it recently. So we felt it was a good time to revisit it. And also, hey, this is the year of the Metroidvania, or the year of the non-linear exploration game. So here we are. We're going to be talking about Metroid Prime Remastered for the Nintendo Switch platform. I talked about it a little bit in that past episode. So Daniel, why don't you tell us about your experience?
I've been meaning to get to this one for a long time. As I've mentioned, I've been working through the Castlevania and Metroid series, and had finally gotten through to Metroid Prime. So a number finally came up. I had access to the local library, which had a copy. So finally queued that up, and yeah, I know it's a tough game to review, especially. Even being a remastered game, I think it still shows a lot of flaws, being a product of its time, sort of very early manifestation of 3D action adventure games. Sorry, of first person 3D action adventure games. And yeah, I know, I really enjoyed it, but I think it's definitely still showing some warts. So yeah, I thought it'd be a good chance to dig into that and compare to some of the other more recent Metroidvanias that we've been playing.
Yeah, well, let me ask you, have you played any other Metroid Prime games? And also, have you played any other, kind of first-person Metroidvanias that you can think of?
Well, this is the first Prime game I've played. I did play like an hour on the GameCube back in the day, and like I couldn't get the hang of the single joystick movement. But and I heard, are there any other first-person Metroidvania games? Oh, there was. I heard it was Darksiders. It wasn't first person, but it's
I
like
think
3D.
that's third person. There's a lot
There
of
was another
third-person
one.
ones,
What was
I
it?
feel like.
Like Arkham Asylum, obviously also third person.
Yeah.
But there aren't that many. Like even just third person 3D Metroidvanias. It's mostly been a 2D affair for that genre.
That's right, and I can't contradict you there, really. I can't think of... I'm sure there are some, and maybe our listenership will point out ones that we missed, because obviously we may have missed some. But I can think of tons of third-person Metroidvania-style non-linear exploration games, not least of which we talked about recently, like the 3D Zelda games, of which they've been pumping them out for a long time. Started off by the Ocarina of Time on the N64. Really, really kind of excellent interpretation of the previously 2D only genre into 3D space. Of course, third person, so it's a little bit different, but actually that game even featured some first person sequences where you had to step into a first person mode to look at certain things. And of course, the newer 3D Zeldas have been killing it and becoming even more of their own thing in the 3D space. We're not going to talk obviously about Metroid Prime 4 because I don't think either of us have played it, and that one apparently has a bit of a retro feel anyway.
I'm curious, like, if it really is the only first person one of these games, like, I wonder what being first person brings to the genre, other than the gimmick. Like I think about what the benefit of first person games and what I enjoy in those, and whether this really captures that. Like to me, it's a level of immersion, of incorporating and internalizing the world around you. That you would get for even whether it's some Skyrim or other role playing games or something like Halo. Like you really immerse yourself in that game and the setting and the atmosphere of it. And I think I don't think it does that particularly well, to be fair. I think of how well even Metroid, Super Metroid, how atmospheric the intro of that was. And I don't think this is anywhere near that in capturing that same vibe, even with that first person.
Yeah, my opinions might differ from you a bit. I think Metroid Prime is actually quite atmospheric when it comes down to it. The one reason why you might want to purposely make a exploration game like this, first person versus third person, I think is kind of immersion. Of course, if you're playing a first-person game, you can't help but feel immersed because you're looking through somebody's eyes. You're seeing, the weapon blaster or tool or whatever it is held out in front of you. And this is a game that is, unlike a lot of Metroid games, is about scanning things and examining things. So scanning is a new mechanism that wasn't in the previous games because whatever, it was just an object you picked up or something like that. Strangely enough, shooting doors was something that was in the original games, so maybe a bit of a shortcut for getting through doors, or usage of the limited kind of action vocabulary that the 2D games offered. But shooting doors is quite natural in this game, and I think Metroid games have always supposed to make you feel lonely, alone. Like you are generally the only human on an entire planet, oftentimes trapped or marooned, and oftentimes hunted, and definitely all the time exploring for and just trying to survive. So I think to that end, it really makes you feel alone because you don't see somebody hanging off over your shoulder. It's just you. You're the only human, and you're looking through your eyes, and you can't depend on anyone else. And I think that's one of the tenets that the more recent Metroid Prime 4 kind of broke, is that there's a bunch of guys squawking in your ear, and just you're having cutscenes with them. So I think that sort of breaks it. And I think this is just my hypothesis, but like a middle ground that kind of maybe proves my point is like Skyrim. Because Skyrim, you can play as first person or you can play as third person. And they have very different feel to it. And I feel like the first person, when you're out there on your own in the frosty mountain landscape, you do feel very much alone. And you feel immersed, like you're the hero. But when you're playing third person, you just feel like some dork with
Just
some
floating through the
purple
world.
robe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why Elder Scrolls Online doesn't appeal to me because I'm just seeing these other dorks jump running over rocky paths in front of me, and I'm like, look at those dorks go.
You can also play that in first person, to be fair.
This just doesn't make me feel any more immersed seeing these dorks going around the landscape. So I guess my theory is immersion.
Yeah, you're right. Scanning, I think, does help a lot. Add a lot of sense to internalizing that world around you, slowing you down, absorbing your surroundings. It's this very archaeological form of piecing together what's happened here, both in the recent history. There's records from the space pirates and the ancient history with the Chozo, I think it's called, and basically putting together these two timelines, essentially piecemeal from the various logs and computers that you're accessing, but you're also scanning the other alien creatures that you see around, and there's this real sense of ecosystem, scanning reading it up on this type of grass or this type of bug and how they interact with each other. I think that does add quite a bit to it. What doesn't work with it, I think, is just the world, the level building. What do you call it? the
World
level
building?
Structure is that it's all very it's all in these very small rooms, largely, and with the alleyways and hallways that are twisting and turning as you move between it. So I have a very little sense of like where am I, like what direction am I facing in relation to everything else around me, and like even there's like 4 or 5 regions, but they're all in their own map. You can't even access the other maps when you can only access the one that you're in, I think.
Right.
And so it's very hard to see where you are in relation and visualize the bigger picture other than this one room that I'm in right now.
Yeah, I think in the map system you can actually get a 3D view of all the other regions, of the 5 regions. But of course, you're just going to have to like collect it in the picture in your mind. Oh, this room is that room. The one with the crashed ship or whatever, because they don't tell you that on the 3D kind of simplified view. But you're right, though. This game does feel very kind of, at times, slow and methodical and kind of like you're archaeologist explorer, not unlike another new-ish game that was in the first person about an explorer called Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. And, I'm not going to say this was a great game because it's published by Microsoft, but I did play it to its completion. And that game also makes you feel very immersed because you're in the first person. You're looking at a lot of things. You have a literal notebook. And you think I'm talking about Indiana Jones, but I'm talking about Metroid. In this game, you have a kind of system in your menu, which is kind of like a log of all the things you're scanning. In this game, this is not a spoiler. This is just a mechanism that's just straight up there. Is like you get graded on the last screen when you beat the final boss. You will receive a number grade out of 100, and that's to indicate how many of the life forms that you've scanned and objects that you've scanned. And some of the later quests are a bit of a, like a treasure hunt, let's just say.
I do feel like there's too many things to scan, to be fair. Like, you walk into a room and there's like, you got your scan mode and there's 10 dots all over the place. Okay, which ones have I already looked at? Which ones are actually worth reading? It's a bit overwhelming at times.
Yeah, let's talk about a little bit of specifics, because I think people can refer back to episode 129 if they want to hear about just the basics about what Metroid Prime is conceptually. But since we're revisiting a game this time, I think we're going to try and delve a little bit deeper. Scanning. So we talked about scanning a bit. I feel like you're right. Scanning, especially when this game takes a tone shift, which it does often. Oftentimes it's quiet, kind of plodding, kind of very slow, intentionally so, and atmospheric. And then it instantly takes a right turn into heavy action because the music starts blaring and then space pirates come jumping in their rocket packs or whatever. And I feel like the scanning, literally doing the scanning, which I think you had to press like left or something on the D-pad to bring up, and then right shoulder, and then it literally pauses the world, and then you zoom in on something and you scan. It is a jarring transition. And quite often it will do things like you have to scan a boss because a boss is a creature and you're in the middle of a boss fight where you should be feeling the adrenaline pumping and gearing up for rollicking action.
And you're trying to dodge their projectiles while you scan them, otherwise it interrupts and starts again.
Yeah, so like that's something that literally takes you out of the moment and does not feel really good. It feels fine when you're scanning some like scrawled writing or whatever, a mural on a wall in an ancient tomb, but not so much when you're scanning the boss that's literally throwing fireballs at you.
And so often what the information actually gives you is just like a code, basically. Like, oh, this wall panel is made of benzene or benethium or whatever the fantasy science word it is, which means, oh, you use your phaser blaster on this. Oh, this has this creature has some kind of electrical attack, so therefore you use this other type of weapon on it. So it's basically just decode. You just see the same science jargon on multiple creatures to say, okay, you just use this item. It's not really a puzzle to it. It's just match the fantasy jargon with the weapon.
Right, or at least even worse, it'll say something super boring like a log of this object has been added to your notes or whatever. It's like, thanks, that was great. I'm really glad I stopped to do that motion. So that's not great, but I still think it was the right choice. I think it was the right choice in this game to intentionally slow the pace down.
Mm.
And, it's not like every moment of the game is filled with action. There are plenty of sequences where you're just like just running down a hall, or you're just leaping, take your little time. This section of the map, oh, I can take a little bit of breather, kind of stop and look around a little bit. And you're right, the environments are fairly small. They're, it's what I would classify as like rooms. Even the sections that are out in the open world are just like these obvious rooms that have very distinctive, like 4 doors that go off of them. And do you want to go to the north one, the south one, or the east one, or whatever? And sometimes you have to go up or whatever to get through another door. So that part of it is cool. I thought there were a couple of spots where they did the map design cleverly. Like there was, they obviously hide things in these games.
Mm-hmm.
And they hide things in even the maps. So they'll reveal to you that there's a door here, but how the heck do you get there? And I thought that at least one section in the world, it was quite cool. A couple of spots where you do eventually get the tool or whatever, as is the case with these Metroidvania games, that allows you to traverse into that section. Quite often it's just a double jump, but sometimes there's a tool that will allow you to see, there's a tool you get later that allows you to see invisible things. And I thought, oh, that was actually kind of cool that they hid that platform there, which I just never looked at. I never looked at that area, obviously, because it was invisible. But the world, I realized, accounted for that space there.
It's like having the They Live glasses on.
Sure. Yeah. So in a couple of spots, I felt like a little bit of that delight, a little bit of that discovery.
It sort of recontextualizes the world.
Yeah, for sure. So that part of it is there as well. But I think that smallness, the compactness of the rooms, let's just say, is probably because the era in which this game came out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
What was it? 2003?
4?
The original? 2002 for the GameCube.
Okay.
Was the original.
Okay.
So, of course, they would skew to match the game layout of that time.
And I can't say exactly what has changed in the remaster, to be fair. I didn't look into that. I mean, obviously you got twin stick movement and controls for one thing, which makes it a lot more accessible. And I think broadly the game does feel pretty good to move around in. Just you like it's pretty seamless, jumping and leaping and shooting your way through it. It does feel a little weightless sometimes. Like I don't feel like I'm in this world. Like I don't like Samus is just jetpacking and sprinting back and like every which way. I don't feel like, again, it's part of that immersion thing. I don't really feel like I'm part of this world interacting with its features. I think I feel like a ghost passing through sometimes.
Yeah, I think 3D first-person platforming
it's hard to achieve.
Is always challenging.
Yeah.
But in terms of Samus's movements, I feel like it's pretty much on par, like with the previous entries. Samus has always had that strange floatiness when she does that spinning flip jump. She always hangs in the air just a little bit longer than a human could. So I kind of just think of her as a superhero in my mind.
Yeah.
So her movement doesn't have to follow logical rules per se.
But it feels like I'm being a little too negative on this. I think part of it's tricky because like this game still has that core Metroidvania, for lack of a better term, structure that is incredibly satisfying. They're getting a new upgrade, finding where you can unlock it, and then the backtracking and exploring is all satisfying in a way that has also been done better since. I think this sort of genre is tough. Like it's only as good as like. Does it still feel good when you're lost and when you're backtracking? And I don't know that this game does necessarily. You're running backwards and forwards quite regularly, running through the same enemies again and again, and most of the time it's not even worth killing them. Just run straight past them. I think it does like eventually flag gives you some vague directions if you do get lost completely. But it's still tricky to figure out. Oh, how do I get to that part of the map? Because it's like it's two different regions away. I don't know the connective tissue to how to get from here to there. I don't know. I didn't find navigating it particularly fun. I was regularly running into dead ends quite a lot. I think like you get a new upgrade, you want to go see what it unlocks, and so often I'd go and unlock a new door and just find another dead end behind that. Like, oh, I need another thing, and like that that was a bit of a killer. Like it killed my motivation to explore and to go and find those secrets. It just like, well, what's the point? I may as well just wait till I've got a bunch of them and do it right at the end of the game.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with there. I think I agree with all of those points. It is definitely of that older school design,
Mm.
and it has kind of that built-in frustration in there. You're never quite sure when an area is fully blocked, like you shouldn't be trying this, or if it's like, oh, it looks blocked, but you can cleverly make it through if you double jump here, or if your health bar is long enough, or whatnot. You're never quite sure, and I guess that's because they want to keep it a secret. They don't want to hold your hand too closely. I think this game does actually hold your hand pretty well. You mentioned the kind of the seismic reports or whatever that your ship sends you periodically. They will quite often just say, "Hey, dude, go check out this area." And I didn't love that entirely because it felt a little bit too, ironically, new school of a technique to be so hand-holdy. But that said, I think I would have just been frustrated and banging my head.
Well, so arbitrary where you're expected to go next. It's like, well, why would I think to go to the ice field right now? Like, it's trying to remember what upgrade goes where. It's not particularly intuitive.
Yeah, and that's the thing about this Metroidvania genre as well, at least in this period, is that this isn't like a RPG Metroidvania, right? This isn't like even the Symphony of the Night where you could just keep grinding and keep leveling up, so you're like gaining something. This is like an adventure game where if you're hitting a brick wall, that's it. You're not moving forward.
And it is a hard game too. Like I died multiple times, lost like an hours of gameplay because of the save point. I missed the save point or it was so far back that I just have to replay that area again.
Yeah, it's true. I can't remember how many dozens of hours of this game that I played, but I did play it for a while as well. I want to talk about a little bit more about some mechanics in this game. So there were four distinct weapon types that you could use in this game. You don't have access to them right away, but you gain access to them over time. They're sort of the tools at your disposal, like many Metroidvania games have. So of course you have your initial, pea shooter, then eventually get the missiles and whatnot. So these are standard kind of de rigueur tools that Samus Aran has at her disposal. But in addition to that, she has three other weapons, of which there is, let me get this straight. It's the kind of like, there's the freeze ray,
Yes, yeah.
and then there's a kind of like a red kind of like flame laser or
I
something like that.
don't think I've got
It's
that
red.
one yet.
Okay.
Okay.
And then there's this like purpley,
It's like the
purpley.
phaser one, I think it's called. Is it called?
Yeah, and it homes a little bit if I'm not mistaken.
Well, they all do really, because I mean, every gun is basically lock on, point and shoot, and that like set and forget, basically, right? There's not a lot of thought to engaging in the combat here.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I would agree with you to a point, but some of those weapons are homing, especially in the powered up versions of them. Like they'll literally home in on a target at quite a distance. And some of them are more instantaneous. Like I think the red one is like a laser, so it definitely shoots your guy quickly. But others of them are so slow that even if you are locked on, the opponent can move before it would reach there. So I found myself switching between the weapons quite often, depending on the opponent. And of course, there are certain enemies, particularly the bosses, that are only susceptible to one
Yeah,
of
you're
the
regularly
weapons.
having to match up, like match the purple laser to the purple enemy, sort of thing, right? Like
Yeah,
this enemy's only vulnerable to ice or whatever.
yeah, and most of the time, that's going to find you in your first 5 minutes fighting a boss or a new enemy. Is basically you're going to be doing the guessing game. It's like which one of these that doesn't work, I'll swap it out into the other one, and that's pretty standard, I guess. I don't know. Did you find the weapons fun or immersive?
Not really. Like I said, it's just lock on and pull the trigger until the thing dies. Really, like it's. I mean, later enemies do start to counter you, but there's not really any tactics or aiming or like it's not particularly engaging. I didn't think.
Yeah, and this is where I think this game should in my opinion, not really be held up to quite a high a standard as other first-person shooter style games that were coming up at that time. 2002, like Halo was already a big thing, I believe, at that time. So this is literally not a first-person shooter, despite the fact that you move in the world and can shoot. It's not really about the fun of shooting, is it?
I think it was trying a little too hard to be a first person shooter. Like you have like five space pirates rushing you in a room, and like all you can do is stand in the corner and shoot at them. Like running, you run away, they lock onto you as well. Like there's not really much you can do when you're being targeted by a bunch of enemies. I found so it didn't really. It could have slowed down that element down a bit too. I think. I mean, obviously the shooting was always an element of the older games, but mostly it was a couple of enemies on the screen at the time, right?
Yeah, in my opinion, the action sequences in this Metroid Prime game is more to change up the pace. And that really is a distraction from the straight up exploration, which is really still the core of the game, and I think would become a bit monotonous if it wasn't broken up by action sequences like this. And really, there aren't a lot of rewards that you get out of combat. You don't gain any XP. You might gain, I don't know, more just missile drops, ammo, which you might need to do some puzzles or whatever and things like that. You might actually gain health back. You might gain more health than you lost engaging in the combat. But really, there's no advantage to taking on non-boss combat.
Unless you're locked in a room until you kill the enemies, that is usually better to just run straight past, right?
Yeah, exactly. Of course, there are those kind of Zelda rooms where you are locked in, where you must defeat the enemies, but really you don't gain an advantage in the most part. Of course, there are some exceptions here or there. I'm sure there are some like enemies that you have to freeze to become platforms or something like that. But yeah, it really is not a first-person shooter in my mind. There just is some first-person shooting in this exploration game.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know what else there is to say about this. I still enjoy it on a sort of the basic Metroidvania level, but I don't know that it's really scratching the itch that I was hoping for in really utilizing this new format as a first person one of these games.
Yeah, I actually, so I beat the game recently, a couple of weeks ago now, so the memory's starting to fade a little bit. I'm not going to explain exactly what happened, but there is a little bit of, like I said, a treasure hunt that you have to do that involves some of that archaeology and scanning. So don't give up on the scanning. You got to keep that up all the way through and find all those side things which you think are optional some of them are actually required, so that's necessary.
Are you timed at all? Because I remember that was the big deal with the original games, like beat the game in 4 hours or whatever, right?
No,
To get the scantily clad Samus in her underwear.
Well, that might be true here, but the ending I got
Yeah.
seemed fine, and I wasn't timed in any way for that. And then at the end of the game there's a little bit of a boss rush, which is not like a literal boss rush. It's not a return of the previous bosses you fought. But there is a bit of a long sequence where you're not given the benefit of saves. So you better be down for some pretty rollicking action in that period. And let me tell you, that couple of battles really does require you to stay on your toes. You have to use both the full complement of your elemental weapons and the full complement of your scanning package as well. So it really is drawing upon all the things that this new three-dimensional entry into the Metroid series added, and integrating it right into the final two combat sequences. So in that effect, I thought it was pretty satisfying till the end, with certainly some dips in the kind of pacing and tone. I told you that I played this game over many and many borrows from the library.
It's hard to remember details in between, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's hard to remember, but a little while ago when you said you started playing Metroid, I'm like, yeah, I enjoyed that game. And then I thought to myself, did I finish that game? So it's kind of bad when you forget that you did or did not finish a game. So I guess I had my fill of Metroid Prime Remastered, realized I hadn't finished it, and then I begrudgingly came back to it. But in the end, I am glad I did. In the end, I am glad I played it because it's more like just reading an old kind of important book that people have been telling you to read for so long. It's like I see where that fits in the kind of the pantheon.
And I'm still definitely curious to see where the sequels evolve this. I know 2 is still quite well regarded. I'm not sure how well it holds up without also being remastered. How the controls are, for example. I think that was on Wii, right? The 2 and 3?
Yeah, 2 and 3 are just total blanks in my gaming history. I guess I wasn't playing. Well, I hadn't finished one on GameCube, despite the fact that I owned it, and I never owned those ones on Wii. So yeah, they're a blank, and
I'm not sure where you
probably
can even get them now, to be honest.
exactly. There's no eShop or whatever that's still open to get them. So good luck, I guess. Get retro. Hey, out through the nose on eBay or whatever to get yourself a copy. If there are any listeners out there who have a physical copy they wouldn't mind lending to one of us.
And a Wii.
Oh, I have a Wii. It's
Okay,
not a problem.
okay.
I can play it. I even have access to a Wii U, so
I have one of those, yeah.
if that's necessary, that can be done. All right. I think we talked at length about those games. I think it's pretty worthwhile. It sounds like you were a little bit down on it.
Yeah, I don't want to dwell on it too much. I said it is hard to. I did enjoy it, but the things I enjoyed about it have also been polished to a sheen in so many other games. It's really hard to point to how this one's doing it any particularly better in any regard.
Yeah, and I honestly think some of the newer 2D Metroid entries are pretty darn good. Like Dread is just so intense. It feels a lot more new than retro. The fact that the kind of those roving bots are there
Right.
tracking you throughout, and you have this like incredibly nail biting action sequences that you have to take on to get them, and they're sort of relentless, and they never let you feel at rest.
I need to get
It's
back to
pretty
that
interesting.
one too. I remember feeling quite lost as well, though, how it ping pongs you between the different zones quite rapidly rather than just slowly exploring and again internalizing that world. And I think largely the 2D Metroidvania games are really good at that. That's one of the appeals is like when everything's on that 2D plane, you can visualize the whole space as part of like one larger contiguous world.
Right. Yeah. The Metroid games, the newer Metroid games, are a gap that I'd like to fill, especially a couple on GBA like Fusion and Zero. I still need to finish because Zero is the remake of number one, I believe.
Yes, right.
So there's plenty of good Metroid to be had there. And who knows, maybe the next Metroidvania we'll try out will be one of those third-person ones we talked about.
Well, if you allow me a couple of minutes, I actually have another one with playing with some unique perspectives.
All right, well, since we got some time to fill, why not? Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly talk about a little game called Minishoot Adventures. This came out in 2024, but a bunch of people have been talking about it in just the last couple of months. It's been on my backlog for a while. It turns out I already own it and I didn't even realize, so I fired that up. And it's actually a twin-stick shooter. I mean, Metroidvania, but probably more Zelda in its structure because you actually have dungeons that you're going into for one thing, but it does still have you get a new ability that lets you unlock upgrades and extra parts of the map that you can explore, basically. But it's I mean, have you played many twin stick shooters, Mark?
Let me think. Yeah, there are a couple on the PlayStation platform. I think I played like Super Stardust for a decent amount. That game's pretty addictive. And I think I played like Geometry Wars probably on the 360. But those were just dabbling. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with shoot 'em up games. So not a lot, but
Yeah,
the ones I played I enjoy.
I mean, I've played a few over the years. It's never really been a hot draw for me, and just in terms of how much it's a very sweaty genre, right? Largely about memorization, like memorizing attack patterns and collectibles and hitting high scores. Not really my motivation, but this really lets you play with those mechanics outside, like without getting sweaty, basically, right? Because for one thing, you're collecting gems that you power up. I mean, it's all pretty obvious. Like you can upgrade the damage, or you can upgrade the fire rate, or you can upgrade the range. Like all pretty obvious upgrade paths there. And you don't even when you die, you don't lose your upgrades, so you can really just grind out the upgrades as much as you want, really. So it's not particularly difficult until like the very end of the game. There was a few challenges. But like, this game broadly just feels very much like it's like a positive version of, well, I don't know what I expected, the dead dove meme, but like it's good. It's like it's what it says on the tin. It's a twin stick shooter. That it's very satisfying mechanics to just explore with those, again, very the core Metroidvania mechanics that are satisfying and exploring that world. There's not a lot to say about it. I mean, other than that, it just does those two things well. It's the two great tastes that go well together. I think it's a pretty solid little game. It does play a little bit with like it does the whole Dark Souls like ambiguous story, and like at the very end like pulls a trick that I don't think it really succeeds on. It's a very cartoony looking game. I don't think it really needs the mysticism of that sort of Dark Souls story. Like just like there's no dialogue really. It's just you're playing as like sentient ships that are like flying around, and I didn't even keep track of what the story was. It's just good dumb fun.
Nice, nice. Of course, there's the shooting Metroidvania game that I mentioned a couple episodes ago, the Night Witch as well.
Oh yes, yeah.
Which does twist things up. That's well worth checking out also. And yeah, I tend to enjoy the shoot 'em up games that have a little bit more going along with it. Like a game like Choplifter, I enjoyed quite a bit that had the rescue element. And there is another series I enjoy, probably my favorite shooter series, R-Type, which has always been a little bit more strategic, in my opinion, with the way that the power-ups get dealt out. So, more fun genres to delve into for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I should say, one way in which I was playing this, I actually just recently picked up a new little retro device called the Mungme Air X. I'd been looking for an upgrade beyond the little flip ones that I'd had to start playing some sort of PS1 era games. More on that in another episode. But I realized that because it's an Android device, it came with a little app called Steam Link on it. So I fired that up to try playing, and unfortunately, it doesn't quite have the fidelity in controls. Like it's not the most comfortable controller, or the fidelity in terms of the connection or the directions. But it is a twin stick device, and it's a relatively easy game. So I think it was a fairly fun sort of sit back, turn your brain off, and fire some pew pew bangs.
Nice. All right, I think we've been talking at length about Metroidvania, so why don't we move into our dessert section?
Absolutely. Why don't you
All
go
right.
first?
Sure. All right. So this is something that's fresh on my mind. I just watched this recently, and I'll only be talking about the first episode of this mini-series. I started watching, I guess, HBO or Max series called Station 11. Now, this has a Canadian connection. It's an American TV show, but it's based on a novel of the same name by Canadian author Emily St. John Mandel. So this has been a series that had been recommended, or I saw some writing on, and I thought it'd be worthy of checking out, and I was proven correct. This is a very intriguing show, but I will fully admit that I don't know everything about this show because it's full of mystery. And I think the format of the first episode is very much like just setting things up. So unlike a lot of shows, it's not like Lost or whatever, where the first scene is them, they're already on the island. No, this is setting some things up. And I was told that this was sci-fi, and the first episode of this show actually doesn't have very much sci-fi at all. It's set in contemporary kind of New York, so it feels very much like present day, which it essentially is. The people are essentially like us, like going about their daily business, riding the subway, going to plays, having relationships, things like that, having tension with your siblings and that sort of thing. And it's very much like that. So it's a great drama in that sense, and that draws you in. And then periodically there's these flashes and these flashes forward. And that's what makes me kind of compare this series to something like Lost, which always had a lot of flashbacks and on occasion a lot of flash forwards. And that's where a lot of the mystery comes in. They're teasing a lot. They're teasing a lot of what will happen. And I guess the most sci-fi aspect of it is that in the show, in that world, there is a author who's created a book, a graphic novel called Station 11. And of course, that's the name of this show. And one of the characters picks it up, and it seems like the story of what was written in that graphic novel seems to be happening in reality to the world. And some of the characters that you see, of these unlikely science fiction type characters that you see, you actually reveal in this real world. Other great things are some really outstanding performances. The protagonist's name is Jeevan, played by Himesh Patel, and his character is very, very kind of sympathetic. A lot of mystery there as well, but you can see that he's kind of dealing with like mental illness or potentially emotional imbalance. But he sparks up this relationship with this young character who he has to kind of take under his wing and protect, called Kirsten, early on. And their relationship is a little bit reminiscent of Joel and Ellie from the Last of Us series. So there's another connection to a video game and also
This is sort of a
popular series.
post-apocalyptic not story too, right?
It is, but the first episode is entirely pre-apocalyptic.
Right.
You just literally see it unraveling around you. So we haven't really reached the post-apocalypse yet.
My understanding is also it's a lot more hopeful than that. The genre is generally pretty nihilistic. I mean, Last of Us as an example.
Yeah, for sure. There is a little sense of that as well, is like the tentatively going out into the world after the thing has gone down. And this one has like just kind of spoiler alert or the kind of trigger warning more, is that this plot, the first episode, deals with a sequence like an outbreak very much like the COVID-19 pandemic that many of us, most of us listening to this, all of us listening to this, let's just admit it, lived through. So if anyone is still feeling a little bit of lingering trauma from that, which maybe I am feeling a little bit more than I would like to admit, you'll definitely feel some shivers and tension watching this episode. So I've said enough. This series, there's a lot of twists and turns and so much that it's promising moving forward. Maybe I'll hate what happens in episode 2 because it'll totally twist things around, but I'm open.
Oh, so you've only seen the first episode?
Yeah, I've only watched the first episode,
okay.
so this is my just like feelings off of just watching episode 1 of Station 11 this week.
And it is just one season, right? One and done?
Apparently, it's a mini-series, so it may have lasted, I think, something equivalent to 2 seasons, but I believe there's only 10 episodes total in the series. So this show, I got it on DVD from the library, was originally on HBO Max. It was released in 2022, and it'll definitely appeal to those fans of shows that I mentioned. Last of Us, Lost, and The Walking Dead.
Excellent. Yeah, I've heard good things. I've been meaning to check it out, but the TBR keeps the to watch list keeps growing.
No doubt. And yourself, what have you been enjoying?
Yeah, I've been reading a little book called Hothouse. So this is by Brian Aldiss. Originally came out in 1962. Some real classic sci-fi. I started reading this years ago. And actually, I never finished at the time, but it left such a strong impression on me in terms of its visuals and setting that I actually started designing a board game, sort of quite loosely inspired by some of these concepts in here. And just recently playing Wild Sea, which we mentioned last episode, I was reminded of this and that I should finish it, which I finally did. I started again and just read through it all. It's not that long, all things considered. It's basically the concept is like millions of years in the future, the sun is dying, the earth is like locked in, like the earth is no longer rotating. It's like in one position to the sun. Like there's one side of the Earth that's always facing the sun and one always away from it. So you can imagine that the side that's always in the sunlight is basically been overtaken by like giant vegetable growths. And like a lot of the animals now are like vegetable versions of animals now. So like flying plant birds. There's these giant plant spiders called traverses that are like a mile long and actually like have strands that go up to the moon. Like the moon is also locked in like in orbit, and so there's these strands basically traveling between the Earth and the moon with these giant spiders, and like the humans would like catch a ride on the back of these spider creatures, and then the humans for that matter like these quite small tribal creatures, like green, I think. So not really recognizable as necessarily humans. They do still have a language. It is a little juvenile. Like all of the creatures are called like the tummy bellies or the juju birds and things like that. Like it's all a little juvenile in ways that like I have to wonder like how much of this is tied into maybe some exoticism or Orientalism. I don't know. From sci-fi at time. There is some not so great gender politics too. I will say that's hard to read, and the general prose. Like it's basically just one long adventure from A to B, just constantly flowing from one thing to the next without much sort of connective tissue, which does make sense because it was originally published as like 5 short stories, I think, that were later connected later on. So maybe it was read better in the original format. But just the concept alone is just so evocative and just this really sticks in your brain. Some really amazing concepts that it just keeps exploring, and it's like the cool visuals. Because like, as you can imagine, it ends up like right on the equator between the sun and between the light side and the dark side, and there's some really cool visuals that you see in that area there too. And it's just this like this golden age of sci-fi that's like, because it's older, you can kind of turn your brain off a little more as terms of like what was possible and like how they envisioned the future. Apparently at the time, even then, they were like, this science is nonsense. This doesn't make any sense at all. But now looking back at it, you can sort of ignore that a little more, I think, and just enjoy the concepts of what they are.
Yeah, I do enjoy some of that early speculative fiction because they didn't really know what was possible, and as a result, the kind of rare worlds that they could imagine were much more imaginative because they didn't know that was impossible to achieve in a practical manner. Who needs practicality?
Yeah,
Right?
it's removed from that sort of the realism of what science fiction tends to be now, and that sort of epic space opera sort of format it tends to take.
Yeah, and I think I've said in the past that I really enjoy fantastical fiction that's truly fantastical. I mentioned this when I was talking about what was that series, Blame, the manga that I was talking about. Is that I feel like a lot of fantasy, and I mentioned fantasy even though it's a science fiction you're talking about, sort of like it centers on the mean. It like has a reference point, like in our world it's Lord of the Rings, right? Everything's centered around Lord of the Rings, or let's just say D&D in the game world. In all science fiction kind of orbits that, and I feel like the games and novels and whatever that have really intrigued me of late, that are the ones that like have flung themselves so far from those grounding foundations that they seem a little bit absurd, like the ultraviolet grasslands and the Morkborgs and things like that. They seem so fun and freeing because they know they're kind of outlandish, right? They know they're not practical.
I was listening to a podcast this week from Remap talking about lore in Morrowind of all things. I'm always listening about anything to do with Morrowind, but basically talking about how we're in this era now where there's so few game developers. Like every game developer today grew up playing games,
Right.
and like they're all made games made by gamers,
Right.
who are very like consuming this very prescribed, it's the curated Bible of these are the games to play if you want to be a game maker, right?
Right.
And I seen the same comment from, I think it was Miyazaki, talking about like anime is only made by anime fans now, and in this very prescribed way of what it can be, rather than people from other art forms coming in and redefining what's possible in that space.
That's right. There are they don't make movies like Star Wars anymore. They keep making more Star Wars.
Exactly, yeah.
But they don't make things that are innovative like Star Wars at the time because everyone has grown up watching Star Wars, right? At the time, really, Lucas was inspired by like Kurosawa movies and things like that, and the war that was happening in Vietnam. Like they were inspired by things that were not established franchises. And I really like some of those outlandish fictions, especially sci-fi from, even the late 19th century, because they really believe some outlandish things about,
John John Carter of Mars.
yeah. Little green men and
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and societies and rivers on the moon and things like that, or Martians, actual real life Martians. It just seems so whimsical, and there's something I really like about that. That's what I enjoy about things like Numenera and things that just kind of take themselves to the nth degree, the farthest degree away from the expected.
Yeah. Well, this was quoted apparently as an inspiration for Gamma World, which I think you have mentioned before. And I mean, it wasn't mentioned as an inspiration in Wild Sea, but there is a pretty direct connection there in terms of the world being giant greenery, a sea of green, essentially. But one of my connections that I've been thinking about a lot, it does at the end pull in a little bit of the Outer Wilds, and just that theme of the sun's going to die, and it's going to die soon, and everything with it, and this sense of like, but there is a cycle. The cycle's going to end. One cycle will end, and the next one will begin. It's not like it is an ending, but it's not the end.
That's cool. Yeah, despite the fact that there are some less than pleasant things about some old fiction, there are some cool ideas too. All right, well that's fun. Why don't we leave it there? And this makes me want to play more games and read some more material.
Absolutely. Lots of stuff out there to enjoy. So if you have any questions or comments on today's games, you can contact us at omnigamersclub@gmail.com or at our website, omnigamers.club.
That's right. You can catch episodes of our podcast on YouTube, where we post videos every time a new one goes up. If you want to dig into our older back catalog, the earliest episodes are only available in audio, so go check those out on a podcatcher of your choosing. We would love it if you would reach out to us via comments or polls, whatever you respond to them, via social media, via YouTube, via our blog, and Spotify as well. And how do people follow us on social media, Daniel?
You can find the podcast at Blue Sky at Omnigamers Club, and I am on Blue Sky at Board Game Feast.
All right. So what do you think we'll be tackling for our next episode?
I've still got a few games to talk about. We've discussed a lot of tabletop the last few weeks, but I've had a few video games on the back burner to discuss. I mean, and we also have Wild Sea. We're playing some more of that this coming week, I think. We'll probably that stew for a little longer, I think, before we go into detail. But yeah, lots of options out there.
Yep, get a couple more sessions in. I will most likely be talking about a tiny little game called Far Lone Sails, I believe it is. There's a couple of Far games, so don't want to get the name mixed up. But this is the first one, Lone Sails. Cute little indie game.
And speaking of Morrowind, I've been playing like 2 or 3 different games inspired by that oeuvre, so might maybe compare some of those.
Very cool. All right, Daniel, why don't we finish it there? And for those listening, until next time, have a balanced diet of games.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.